The king promising us a branch of education that comes directly with taxes. Of course it will come with taxes.
Hello, I'm Sarah Leonard.
And I'm Justin Trowbridge. Welcome to Taxes, Tea, and Tyranny, an electronic field trip to Colonial Williamsburg.
We are in a tavern in Williamsburg, the capital of the Virginia colony. It is the winter of 1774.
The young men that you are about to meet are law clerks for some of the most important men in the colony of Virginia.
Clerks are the lawyer's assistants. They run errands, copy important legal documents, do filing, and write letters for their employers. In return, they learn the law.
The men that they work for are directly involved in the political life of the colony, and their clerks are also well informed of the political state of affairs in America.
These group of friends often gather to discuss the news of the day.
These are troubling times in the American colonies, and the news from Boston has troubled even the clerks of Williamsburg.
'Tis amazing times. Who would have thought that a riot in Boston would excite Virginians so? After all, Bostonians are a lawless people, forever in some strife. They bring misfortune down upon themselves. That any of us amongst her sister colonies even care is, I think, remarkable. Even my master has taken to defending the Boston rabble, and he is considered amongst the conservatives here in Virginia. Oh, I beg pardon. I needs first introduce myself. I am Andrew Winston, clerk for Mr. Robert Carter Nicholas, a well-respected gentleman in the colony of Virginia and abroad. He is a lawyer before His Majesty's General Court, the highest court in our land, and he serves as treasurer of Virginia. As his clerk, 'tis my job to copy his letters and court papers, and in this way am I instructed in the law. But there is little of the law practiced in this year of 1774. The courts in Virginia are nearly shut down. It's politics that's all the talk. Come and join us, my comrades, the clerks and such fellows of this city.
'Tis true, Andrew, and were a time when I too would have said that politics was nothing but talk. Well, now it seems politics could well lead us to blows. And all on behalf of Bostonians? It is incredible. Oh, surely no Virginian will lay down his life for a Massachusetts man.
Be not too sure, William. The same litany of parliamentary outrages that Bostonians protest strike at the heart of Virginia, too. First, the Stamp Act, then the Townshend duties, now the tax on tea. Tyranny, by God! If Parliament continues to illegally tax us, we will resist. If blows it must be, then by God, blows we shall strike.
John, you are a radical. You've become enamored with Patrick Henry and his irresponsible talk. You should take a more conservative approach, like our friend Hugh here. So, Hugh Hallowell, clerk to John Randolph, Esquire, His Majesty's Attorney General for the colony of Virginia. What say you?
I say, gentlemen, that the king and his parliament have the right to make laws governing the realm, and we, as loyal subjects, must obey them. If we wish to change the laws, we should petition His Majesty.
John, no. Let him finish.
If we wish to change the law, we should petition the king, explain our concerns, and ask to have our grievances redressed. These lawless Bostonians cannot be countenanced.
Bostonians are no more lawless than other. Of course they're being lawless.
You can see the tempers run high. Once, these were the debates of reasonable men. Now, passion rules the heart. But perhaps it would help if you understood better how we arrived at this day. It began 10 years ago. The French and their Indian allies had been defeated by His Majesty's troops, with major assistance from the colonial militia and men like Virginia's own Colonel George Washington. The war was costly. Great Britain was in debt, and Parliament decided to pay off that debt by taxing the colonies. They passed the Stamp Act and required that we pay a tax on every legal document, indentures, wills, land deeds, and the like. We were to pay a tax on newspapers, almanacs, pamphlets. Thank you, Violet. Parliament even taxed our playing cards and dice. It was an attempt to enslave us. As free-born Englishmen, we are entitled to certain basic rights and privileges. One of those is that we should govern ourselves. Our Virginia legislature should pass laws for Virginia, not the Parliament in London. Americans protested, and Parliament repealed the stamp tax. But they did not stop their efforts to oppress us. Parliament passed the Quartering Act, forcing Americans to provide food and lodging for the British Army in America. And when New York refused, Parliament threatened to close down the New York legislature. In 1767, they passed the Townshend duties to tax the importation of paper, lead, paints, and a variety of other items, including tea. These duties would destroy the trade and commerce of the American colonies, and so we protested these taxes too. And they were repealed, all except the tax on tea. Ah yes, the tea. Tea has become the heart of this story. The drinking of tea has become most fashionable for every sort of person. From the highborn to the lowest and meanest, taking tea is commonplace. The demand for its importation is high, and people are quite willing to pay a price for this habit of drinking a cup brewed of these delightful leaves.
Get it at Mistress Hunter's shop just down the way. Mind, I shall be sorry to be quit of my tea and my...
But they will not pay a tax to Parliament. Nay, Americans have gone to great lengths to avoid paying this tax. In Edenton, the capital of North Carolina, 51 ladies gave up the custom of drinking tea.
We, the ladies of Edenton, do hereby solemnly engage that we will not partake in the pernicious custom of drinking tea, and that we, the aforesaid ladies, will not wear any cloth or clothing manufactured in England until such time that all parliamentary acts which tend to enslave this, our native country, shall be repealed. Now, Mrs. Abigail Charlton, will you be the first to sign?
I am proud to be the first. And who will be next?
Would that all the protests against tea had been this peaceful. The tax on tea was to be paid, you see, when the tea was unloaded from the ship. Americans had no intention of paying this tax. They resolved to protest it, just as they had the Stamp Act and the Townshend duties.
It was not just the Bostonians, my loyalist friend. Up and down the eastern coasts of this new world, Americans refused to accept shipments of tea.
Trivial. A few misguided malcontents. It is the radical opposition who are the rotten apples here, John. And one rotten apple ruins the whole barrel quickly.
The only thing rotten in this affair is Parliament's attempt to levy an illegal tax.
Illegal! It is the destruction of private property that is illegal. Why Parliament
But
can
dear,
tax...
no one was planning anything illegal. If tea was never unloaded from a ship, no tax need be paid. All was well. Ships simply did not unload cargoes of tea.
But then His Majesty's Governor of Massachusetts decided to unload the tea at any cost. Not even loyal Hugh here would think such a forthrightly bold action. It was only then that Bostonians decided to take matters into their own hands.
I heard these Sons of Liberty disguised themselves as Indians and boarded 3 ships of the East India Company lying in Boston Harbor. Can you imagine working-class Bostonians all decked out in feathers and war paint, hauling the tea out of the ship, breaking open the chests and dumping it into the harbor? Oh, what a sight that must have been.
Reasonable men would call this an illegal act. The destruction of private property is against the law, and one might assume that royal authority would seek out those guilty of this crime and punish them.
Punish patriots? True sons of liberty? Surely you jest. The British Parliament enslaves us through their tyranny, and you cower at their feet like a sick little puppy dog.
Come, John. Do not...
All this talk about white folks being enslaved, I got to laugh. They don't know nothing about being a slave, I'll tell you that. All this talk about freedom and liberty, but never no talk about freedom and liberty for folks like me. Don't much matter to me who's making the laws, 'cause they's all designed to keep me down. And I'll tell you what else. If I got my hands on a tin of tea, I sure wouldn't be wasting it by throwing it in no harbor.
John, we are loyal British subjects. The Bostonians had no right to destroy that tea. They should pay back the owners for the damages.
Instead, firebrands are inciting rebellion amongst the loyal subjects of His Majesty King George III, and that, sir, is treason.
You mark my words. The British Parliament will not rest until it has forced American colonies to our knees. I am as loyal as any man Jack here at this table, but I will not see my country destroyed by greedy politicians in London.
Passion fuels the debate of my friends here. Even the debate of reasonable gentlemen has become heated. Everyone expected that Parliament would take some kind of action against Boston. After all, the destruction of private property cannot go unpunished. But what happened next hath shocked us, all of us, to the very core.
Yes, sir. Sir, the latest news. Sir, latest news. Sir, the latest news. There you are. Sir, the latest news. There you are, sir. Them boys is mighty interested in the news these days, and I've been listening. I heard how last winter, them Sons of Liberty up in Boston marched themselves down to that wharf, got up on those ships and threw the tea in the harbor. Oh my, but the King and Parliament was angry, mighty angry. They passed a whole passel of laws to take away some of Boston's liberties. They called them the coercive acts. Now the Americans, they call them intolerable acts. These Americans sure do have some curious ways. Always fretting about each and every one of their own liberties, but they never seems to notice that they've taken away the liberties of folks like me. Still, maybe something come of all this. Americans get to fighting with the King's men, and maybe I get a chance to slip away. Yes, sir. Maybe some liberty for me in all this here commotion.
This is incredible, this preposterous. Listen to this. The port of Boston is closed to all commerce.
Oh, they've named General Gage governor of Massachusetts.
When they make the commander of the British Army in America a royal governor, it can mean but one thing.
Aye, I'm with you here, John. It is clearly the establishment of martial law in Massachusetts.
And Parliament has passed the Massachusetts Government Act. They've abolished town meetings, and now the king and the governor, they're appointing officials that once were elected by the people.
Oh, and this Administration of Justice Act protects those very same officials. If they're accused of a crime, they'll be tried in Britain, not in the American colony where his offense hath harmed the community.
The Quartering Act is reinforced. British soldiers may be housed in any vacant building owned by a private citizen. My God, these measures are excessive.
Nay, a strong hand. It is a strong hand what's needed. If mobs can rule the streets of Boston, then they can rule the streets of Philadelphia or even Williamsburg. The destruction of tea cannot go unpunished. And besides, what care we if some Massachusetts men suffer?
When my neighbor's house is on fire, I must help fight the flames, or my own house may be next. We see a sister colony grievously oppressed by the hand of tyranny for simply making a stand against the infringements and violations of American rights. If Boston can be treated thus, why not Virginia?
Tom, we are not like Boston. Still, these measures do seem harsh to me. No individual stands accused in Boston. No person is indicted. No court hears testimony of any crime. And yet Parliament punishes every man, woman, child, widow, and orphan in the city of Boston, be they guilty or no. 'Tis contrary to every principle of British law.
Aye, Samuel. Well, closing the port of Boston? Businesses will be ruined. The citizens will starve while soldiers march through the streets and harass innocent people. It is harsh to punish the whole city because a few radicals have a tea party.
With passions running so high, both in support of or against our Massachusetts brethren, several men of our legislature, including Thomas Jefferson, Patrick Henry, Richard Henry Lee, and Francis Lightfoot Lee, met together one night in May 1774 and devised a resolution for a day of fasting, humiliation, and prayer. The House of Burgesses passed this resolution, and on June 1st, 1774, a day of fasting was observed with due humiliation and prayer. The Burgesses met at the Capitol and then processed through the streets to the church.
Today a great seafaring city has been blockaded. Today, a great seafaring people can look ahead only to empty wharfs and ships rotting at anchor. The distance from Boston to Williamsburg must now be measured not only by the hazards of miles, but by the hazards of a common threat to our mutual welfare. It is to this purpose that we join in a covenant pledge today, a covenant to work together in God's name with all friends of liberty against injustice and tyranny. Let us pray.
Here at Bruton Parish Church, the Right Reverend Mr. Price preached and prayed, and the powerful men of Virginia listened.
Guide and protect our brothers in Boston and unite our cause with theirs, that justice and freedom may be preserved among us now and for all time. And we pray thee, O Lord, soften the hearts of those who do injustice, so that this issue may be resolved short of war. Amen.
Not all Virginians agree with the protest. John Randolph, who employs my friend Hugh, is one of those.
That the Bostonians acted unwarrantably cannot, I think, be denied by even the most zealous American. We ought, in the first place, to declare, and in the most public manner, that the act of the Bostonians in destroying the property of the East India Company was illegal and ought not be countenanced. Instead, we fast and pray and encourage their lawlessness. There never was a country in a more distressed situation than Virginia at this juncture. We are in dispute with our mother country. If this continues with the same vehemence on both sides, it will surely lead to our destruction.
Outside Williamsburg, in the counties, there is hot debate both for and against the cause of Boston. Church gatherings have turned to open protest. The flames burn hotter now than ever they have before.
Not all protest against His Majesty's Parliament. There are those who remain faithful to their duty as loyal subjects.
These are not loyalists. These are traitors to Virginia's liberties.
Be careful, Hugh Hallowell. Be more circumspect in your language. There are those who would take great exception to your words.
Indeed. I heard tell of a Reverend Mr. Boucher in Maryland who opposes the American protest. He now fears for his life, and I hear carries a brace of pistols into the pulpit when he preaches.
It is true. For the day of fasting on June 1st, the Reverend Boucher intended to preach against American protests of the Intolerable Acts. When local patriots heard his plan, they armed themselves to confront him at the door of his church. They intended to intimidate the good Reverend, but Boucher was defiant. He took up the leader by the collar, drew a pistol from under his coat, and declared that if any violence was offered, he would instantly blow the gentleman's brains out. It stunned the crowd, and Boucher was able to make his escape. He mounted his horse and rode for the safety of his home. This kind of violence becomes more common. I fear it will not be long before the voices of reasonable men can no longer be heard above the angry shouts of radicals who either strongly disagree with or strongly support King and Parliament. Now it is the summer of 1775, and the time of moderation is done. Associator committees are formed in each county, and they have become the organizers for our protest against Great Britain. The royal governor has left Williamsburg for the safety of a British warship. All is in turmoil.
Nay, it has become time for the people in each county here in Virginia to play their part. Across Virginia, patriots heed the call.
Yeah, indeed, we have mob rule. The commoner who knows nothing of government, no education, no concern except for his own family farm. These are the people that call themselves patriots, wreaking havoc on their neighbors and those who remain loyal to the crown.
What say you, man? Hold your tongue before the committee is called down upon you,
Call them
sir.
as you might. I will not let the rabble silence my tongue. I will not watch my language. I'm worried for you.
And thus it is that political disagreement has become the fabric of everyday life. The county committees and armed bands, known as independent companies, force every Virginian to support the cause of American liberties. Woe be the man who tries to import tea. Shopkeepers are forced to keep prices low, and should any man voice an opinion in opposition to the patriot cause, he may well fear for his life. The committees of safety gather more and more power. The boycott of British goods has caused tensions. Many common folk worry that because goods are in short supply, merchants will raise their prices drastically. The association committees now move to regulate the merchants.
Nothing to say. Nothing whatsoever.
We are members of the County Committee, and we demand our right to inspect your books and accounts. You stand accused, sir, of inflating prices to profit unfairly from this crisis!
Crisis indeed, sir. The only crisis is this incessant harassment. Do you not have a court order with you? Have you not brought the sheriff?
We don't need a court order! We have the authority of the people of this committee, the associators!
And who is my accuser? Have I not the right to face my accuser?
You stand accused by the public!
A rebel, you mean? Where is the law? Why does not this common public respect my right to property?
We shall inspect these premises. If you refuse, we will appoint the independent company to enforce our orders. Now stand aside, sir!
I will not!
Woe be the man who speaks publicly against the county committee or its supporters. They find themselves dragged bodily from their homes in the dead of night, threatened with tar, feathers, and worse.
Mr. Sherlock.
Quiet! Quiet! And you, John Sherlock, you, sir, have boldly declared that people like us, those who resist the British ministry, are rebels. And that one day you expect to be employed in hanging us. Furthermore, you have openly declared that you desire no greater bondage under the guise of liberty than to be bound by the association. And that furthermore, you have called the independent company of this county, these good men, an unlawful mob. Many other idle and foolish words.
It is no longer safe to express dissent, to call another a rebel against the king, to insult a member of the committee or independent company. To speak in opposition to the boycott of British goods brings swift retribution.
Let him speak! Let him speak! I declare my opinion has been altered. I most heartily wish for success to this my native country. And her present and honest struggle for liberty with the mother country. And I do here promise. I will do everything in my power to retrieve my character from my countrymen.
Well, these lads is a bit more subdued than usual. They's weighty things a happening, yes, sir. Why, all this lawlessness has caused the governor, Lord Dunmore, to leave the palace here in Williamsburg. He's gathering an army, they say, an army to march on Williamsburg and take it back. And they say he'll free any slave what belongs to a rebel. Any slave who will fight for King George. Now, I ain't no fighting man, but I've got half a mind to go and join him. May be the only chance I get to have my freedom. Maybe so.
And so you can see how we have come to this day. It may seem at first a trifling thing, this little bit about tea. But the Boston Tea Party seems to brew all the troubles of America into one pot.
'Tis true that once upon a time, we Virginians, or others in our sister colonies, would have paid little heed to the plight of Boston. But in this last year, we have come to realize that we cannot allow the liberties of Bostonians to thus be abridged.
If Boston Harbor can be closed, our Virginia ports can be closed.
If British troops can be quartered in Massachusetts homes, then they may be quartered in my home.
If martial law can be established in Boston, it shall next be established here in Williamsburg.
If Bostonians might be arrested and brought to London to be put on trial, against every principle of English law and constitution, then so might Virginians.
Patrick Henry has given the call, liberty or death. It is time for all true sons of Virginia to step forward and defend their country. I have joined Colonel Henry's regiment, gentlemen. I report to camp tomorrow.
Gentlemen, I cannot countenance this talk. It borders on treason. Those of you that I hath called friend, that hath shared my victual and drink, I cannot reconcile myself to this day. It is madness, this thing you speak of. It is sheer madness.
Phew.
As you can see, there are those of us, good men, honorable men, who cannot follow the course that seems before us. Others heed the call of Patrick Henry. Virginia seems torn asunder, and all for this small business of tea in Boston Harbor. The Boston Tea Party has caused us to see that we are not just Bostonians, nor Virginians, nor North Carolinians, nor Pennsylvanians. We are Americans, and we stand together in defense of our American liberties.
Andrew.
'Tis good to see you, Samuel. It has been a long time. How fare you?
I am well. The work with the Committee of Safety is taxing, however. Day and night, I am set organizing their papers and writing their letters in hopes of finding money, provisions, ammunition, and arms for the army. There are no provisions to be found, Andrew. I fear cause cannot succeed without these necessary provisions.
Tavern keeper, ask you, sir, what have you done with Violet? I was looking forward to seeing her on my return to the city. Where are you hiding her?
Run off.
Sir, what say ye?
Run off, I say. She's run off to join Lord Dunmore and his army. I swear to you, sir, that blackguard is turning the slaves all against us, rising them up in revolt so that they can come back and murder us in our beds.
And what hear you of Hugh?
Gone. He was under suspicion. The committee sent the independent company to harass him, more than once. Then one day he was gone. Rumor is that he's left back for England. He's gone, Andrew. I fear we'll never see him again.
William, greetings. 'Tis good to see you, man. How fare you? Where is John? Stabling the horses, I imagine.
No, Andrew. John has been killed. He died in my arms in the field hospital yesterday.
How can this be? How did this happen?
We had taken the city of Norfolk. And then, on January the 1st, Lord Dunmore's forces began bombing the city. John was sorely wounded, and he never recovered.
And so you see what we have come to. My comrades, the clerks and such fellows of this city, are no more. This business over tea in Boston hath torn us asunder. It has turned friend against friend. Some say that the price is too high, that war is foolish. But I hear the words of Patrick Henry hanging in the air. He said that a gentleman may call for peace, but there is no peace. Is life so dear, or peace so sweet, as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. Like Patrick Henry, I have chosen my course. Give me liberty, or give me death.